Hey guys, welcome back to the Uncommodified podcast and to another UNCORK Conversation, my favorite kind of conversations for sure. And my guest tonight, once again actually, is Lisa Schermerhorn. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure.
We had such a great time when we chatted before, and we had to do it again. Of course, we're chatting about something different. So on this episode, guys, we're going to chat about Lisa's new book. And if you're watching on YouTube, this is Lisa's new book. And by the end of our conversation, I believe you're going to want to pick up a copy. I got mine on Amazon, and you might want to hunt it down there or somewhere else. I'm sure it's available in lots of other places. But the book is entitled "In Every Belief is a Lie." And literally, in the word belief, there is a lie. Very crafty, very crafty. I like that title, Lisa. Great job. It's a good one. So for those who want to learn more about Lisa and her work, you can check out episode 66 of the Uncommodified podcast. That episode was entitled Mindset Reset, Getting Off the Hamster Wheel. That's a pretty creative title I came up with, I believe. It was an episode in which Lisa and I explored the conscious and subconscious beliefs and the scripts that we run and we rehearse in our minds, good ones and some bad ones, and how they predict and propel our behavior, unfortunately or fortunately, I guess depends on how you look at it. She shared some practical ideas, strategies, tools to create and sustain mindset shifts and resets, and how discovering your why, which is a big, important macro theme of Lisa's life, why that's so important and connected to all of this. So if you want to check out that podcast episode, that's number 66. Now, this is an UNCORK Conversation, so of course, I share a drink with my guests on this. Lisa, she is gone healthy on me, which I am challenged by, which I like it. Lisa, what are you drinking tonight?
I have my glass of water.
My
'cause
glass of water. And Tim is not doing the water, as most of my guests know. Tim doesn't always do the water. I'm actually drinking a really nice. It's a California wine. It's a Robert Mondavi Private Selection, aged in bourbon barrels. It's a really nice Cab Sav. So I get no promotional money from wineries yet, but you should have a glass of this wine sometime. It's very good. So cheers to you, Lisa.
Cheers.
That's a good glass of wine, and then you have a great glass of agua. So that's good to know. All right, so back to the matter at hand. This book here, "In Every Belief is a Lie," and there literally is in the title. So here's why I want to start the conversation, Lisa. Why this book at this time?
I've been trying to write this book for 20 years.
Okay. There's a story in that journey. I see.
There is a total story in
Yeah.
it. And what happened was, and I kept sitting down in front of a blank screen, and I had these beliefs, which were lies, because when I was a little girl, I went to kindergarten early, and so I was one of the youngest in my class, and I had undiagnosed learning disabilities. Everyone could read, everyone could write, everyone could do their numbers, and I was lost. So I thought that I was stupid, and I spent every summer of my childhood in summer school. I had this record player or tape player going in my head saying, "Who are you to write a book? What do you have to offer that that's not already out there?" And I struggled with this for years. And because I'm a coach, I understand the importance of coaching. And I wanted to work with someone who had a similar background that I did because I know what I do works. And I found someone who I had studied with in Italy. We began to do some work together, and she had me make a list of all of the lies that I believed about myself. And we cleared them. And when you have this image, I liken it to the metaphor of, imagine a highway and it's filled with boulders and you have a destination at the other end of that highway, but I put those boulders there. So what we did was we just started taking these boulders and putting them aside and moving them, and with each one, what happens is when you're in alignment with who you are and what you're supposed to do, everything just starts to show up. And when I tell you, from the moment I started working with her, in less than 6 months, the book was written, it was edited and formatted. I had the cover, the title, everything, and went to bestseller in 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
So the right time was all right time for you based on what you had, the work you've been doing, but also the right time. It's like a crescendo of a lot of different things coming together, and of course, then sort of like magically, and not so magically with lots of work,
Right.
magically this thing appears out of the mist of 20 years.
Exactly, because it sounds like, oh, it was so easy for you, and I was like, this is 20 years worth of work, chipping away at all those belief systems, and it's when you're ready, it becomes easy and effortless to release,
Mm,
but you have to be ready, and when you believe so strongly that you can't do it, then you won't be able to do it.
mm,
I always say I don't sprinkle magic fairy dust on people and that things appear. Sometimes it means leaving a job. Sometimes it's about getting certain relationships out of your life. Sometimes it means, completely changing the way you think about or how you see the world. Everyone has different lenses of how
mm,
they see the world.
That's interesting. So again, if you're listening in, I always believe you're listening for a reason. You're making a choice. You've got a finite amount of time every day, and if you're going to spend maybe 45 minutes or so with us during this podcast, there's a reason you're listening. So, do you have a highway full of boulders? I suppose that's the first question that maybe I want to ask myself. I I think the answer is yes. I do have a highway full of boulders. Hopefully that highway doesn't lead to the wrong place, but it hopefully it's leading in the right direction. But it's got some boulders, and so this book, as I've started to read it, and my wife started to read it, and I'll be really honest, I haven't quite finished it yet because I just picked it up, but I've gotten a good way through it, and I am being challenged by the book. I have to say something though, and I have a question. So when I first saw the book, and because the cover has a woman on it, I wondered if it was going to be just for my wife. I thought this would be a great book to buy my wife. And then I realized, aha, Lisa, you're sneaky. You're sneaky. This isn't a just for the females among us. And so you were a little sneaky there because I bought it thinking this is a great book for my wife. And then I was like, no, it's not just for Pam. Lisa, Lisa, Lisa.
Well, that cover is actually me that my one of my closest friends who's a photographer took of me and used a lot of Photoshop.
Oh, fair enough. But you know what? It's a very, very. I love the cover, but I had to admit, I thought when I bought it, oh, this would be a nice book for my wife. I think maybe sometimes we buy things for others that we need for ourselves. Sort of, I guess that's projection at its best form, I suppose.
Well, it's interesting because I didn't explain in the book because this was such a big part of my childhood, but I realized not everyone has it. On the cover, I have my fingers crossed.
Yeah, we'll see that.
And because as a child, we would cross our fingers if you to protect yourself from lying. It didn't count.
Interesting.
I don't know if you
Oh
remember that
yes,
as a
yes,
child.
yes,
Did you
yes,
ever cross your
yes,
fingers?
yes, yes.
So that was the purpose of crossing my fingers, and I thought I did not explain that in the book.
Well, second edition, we'll have you'll have to tell us what that's all about. So, hey, thanks for filling me in on that because that
Yeah.
is actually much more crafty than I originally anticipated. So I'm learning as we go. So this is a great book. Again, if you haven't read it, haven't seen it, you should pick it up. So let me ask you this question. I want to get started. So when I started reading the book, and I was playing around with your idea, which is actually well said and actually quite provocative. This idea that in every belief is a lie. I asked myself the converse question. Well, if in every belief is a lie, is in every lie is there some truth?
Absolutely. And this is how it works. I want you to think about this is not a political statement. It's just you have people who watch Fox News, you have people who watch MSNBC and CNN, and they all come from different angles, right?
Mm-hmm.
And everyone who's watching those shows believes they're getting the truth.
That's right.
How is that possible? How is the person who's watching Fox News and MSNBC both getting the truth?
Mm,
So, what everyone is getting is some of the truth, and the truth is missing.
mm,
It's all from the lens that we see the world that we gravitate to. And how do we discover the truth? That's a hard one. I found that what is true for me is different than what would be true for you. What I do is I go inward and I go in and say, what feels right? What works for me? And then I follow that
Hmm. Hmm. That's
because that's
interesting.
my truth.
Hmm. That's an interesting way of looking at it. And your simple analogy just resonates and makes a lot of sense in that we all believe that what we think and believe isn't just good. We typically move from it's good to it's right, and from to it's right, it's the only right. So there is this progression I know in myself, in my own thinking. I think what's happened as I've gotten older, I'm 57 now, and I think as I've gotten older, I've started to realize that my rightness or correctness is not quite as right or correct as I used to think it was. And that was something that I really unraveled me in the beginning, because I always saw myself as a truth seeker, and therefore the game was done when I found truth. But then when I realized that the truth isn't quite as truthful as I anticipated it to be, that was very unmooring for me.
It was for me too. And here's the thing with the climate that we have in the world right now,
Hmm.
with people being so polarized. When you asked me why the time, why now, was it broke my heart to see people who were on different sides of the spectrum of what was going on in the past couple of years.
Yeah.
People attacking each other, people being disinvited to, Christmas, to family events, people being disenfranchised in all different ways. And I thought to myself, what happened to just dialogue
Hmm.
and finding out why someone believes what they do and coming together, because maybe you have some wisdom for me that I could use, and I have some wisdom for you that you could use. But this polarization was very, very hard because ultimately we need each other.
Hmm.
We can't go through the world, and we need both sides to balance each other out. We need to come together. And this whole thing about I'm right, you're wrong, or people calling each other names and stupid and whatever it is, how is that benefiting us as a culture? How does that make us look as human beings? My place is I honor your truth. I want to know you because you have something to offer me.
Hmm.
And I hope that I might have something for you.
Yeah.
And that's really where I try and come from in this book and help people understand. There's an exercise that I have people go through where you draw a circle, imagine your own lens. Everyone comes from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Everyone has a different programming, be it trauma, the belief systems of your parents, your grandparents, your teachers, your siblings, reading, book, watching a movie, all those things get imprinted in you as a young child.
Hmm.
And then that we get older and that imprinting doesn't necessarily work for us anymore. And then what do? When we have a tribe, a family that has a certain belief that may be very religious, and you suddenly feel like, I'm not sure this is right for me, that threatens the tribe
Hmm.
and you become ostracized. So to find your own truth is not an easy thing.
No, no. And you're describing, by the way, an exercise that my wife found very intriguing for her, in just looking at how she sees the world and the lenses in which she sees it from. And that we had an interesting discussion around that. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate the reference to that, because it really created a conversation between Pam and I around the lenses that we bring, and sometimes how very different our lenses are, my lens and her lens are, to the same circumstance, maybe in our family, maybe in society, but what we're recognizing sometimes, particularly with our kids, that we both experience the same thing in the moment, but the lenses that we're gridding that through are very different, and therefore the conclusion of what we think we heard or what happened is, it can be subtly and sometimes substantially different. And this has led to some interesting conversations where it's like, well, let me see this from your perspective. Why don't you see this from how I see this? And then trying to help us understand, almost putting that together and saying, well, maybe there's something going on in the midst of this which is different. So great exercise. And again, I would encourage you, as you read this book, don't just read the book, do the exercises. The exercises in this book are really great, Lisa, and they really make this practical, and they create great application and some really deep thinking, and ultimately turn it into a book that becomes very personal in nature. And that's what I really love about your writing style, but also about the exercise. So listen, let's tuck into the book. There really is one chapter in particular I want to focus on, and then I have a follow-up question that is not necessarily a chapter in your book, but it's definitely a theme that I'm seeing in the book that's going to be helpful to me. So chapter 2 is entitled, How is a Lie Built? And first of all, I love the title, because when I read it, I was like, well, how is a lie built? It made me want to answer that question and understand and explore it. So can you just quickly help us understand, and my listeners understand, how are lies built in our lives? How are these boulders
Right.
built?
So there's several ways that it's built. One of the things that I just mentioned, our brain frequencies from the time we're born until we're about 21, 22 years old is a very slow frequency that absorbs an enormous amount of information. If you think about what a newborn has to learn between light, emotion, frequency, color, you name it, what they have to absorb, learning to walk, um, that is extraordinary. So we've got this information now. They're taking information from their mother, their father, their siblings, their teachers as they're growing up, any traumas that happen. Money mindset is huge. If your family had money issues, that gets imprinted. And it works both ways, because there are people with money, but they still have scarcity mindsets.
Mm-hmm.
So that runs a whole gamut. All these things build the belief systems. Part of my belief system was that I wasn't smart and that I would always have to be taken care of because I just didn't have what it took. That was reinforced over and over again. How the life and another thing is we inherit beliefs. There's something called epigenetics where we can inherit beliefs. I'm working with someone out of Mexico right now who has Aztec and Mayan DNA, who has um, ancestral trauma from what they had to experience, and being wiped out, all the way down to him that he's carrying that isn't even his. It's unconscious.
Mm.
So we can have beliefs that are unconscious. They actually did a study with mice where they shocked them and had them smell a certain a certain smell, and they associated with the shock, and they would run whenever they'd smell that smell.
Mm.
Their grandpups automatically, as soon as they had the smell in their cages, they would run without ever having been shocked. And they've done studies with descendants of Holocaust victims, victims of war, all kinds of things. There's a lot of science behind it. So we have all of these programs that get stuck in us, and then there's even more. We have something called our reticular activating system. It's a filter because we get hit with millions of bits of information every day. We cannot process all of it. So it acts as a filter to help us find what we need. So it bases it on our unconscious belief system.
Mm.
It's like when you buy a white car and suddenly, how many times you think like, oh, I bought this really cool car that no one else has, and then all of a sudden you're driving and you see it everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
When you experience any kind of trauma, the blood leaves your brain, goes out to your extremities, and then what happens is, for safety and security, your brain will grab onto the first thing that makes sense, that feels safe, and that becomes a belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And here's something I even say in my book. Not everything is that oh, I don't have the quote in front of me now. I just lost it. But not everything that's true I just lost it. I apologize. Not everything that makes sense is
But
true.
we need to stop for a second. You know what you just did, Lisa? Thank you very much, by the way. You just proved you're human. And I was beginning to wonder. So the fact that you are going, oh, I'm not quite sure about that one. That's good, actually. That makes me feel good, Lisa.
Oh,
You made
oh.
me feel human. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I was trying to get the word, but it's everything that makes sense is not always true,
Yeah.
and not everything that's true always makes sense.
Yes, and I remember that quote.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So within that, I always like to say to people, when you're looking at your belief system, just because it makes sense doesn't mean it's true. There's some crazy stuff out there
Yeah,
that, how many times do we say, if I made a movie out of this situation, no one would believe it?
that's right.
We have those things that happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
What I've found is, in order to break the lie, what happens is, being you should be easy and effortless, right? Being you should be just you and being joy. When you're not feeling joy anymore, it's something to look at. What is causing this? What is here that's making me unhappy? Am I in a job that I'm doing because I'm living I'm my parents said I should become an accountant because I'll be able to support my family and blah blah blah. You've got this list, but there's no joy in it. They're not happy, and now they're stuck. What do I do now? How do I leave this job? Or I don't believe in what I'm doing is really what I want to offer to the world. I want purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So I have people go inward, and when you go inward, we hold on to these belief systems, and then I help you release it. And it's a really simple technique. I learned this from an 88-year-old man with a gray ponytail and drove a Mercedes convertible, Dr. Al, and he taught me this emotional release method. So when you focus on the area in the body that you're holding on to, you feel the sensation, and then in order to release it, you just say simply, should I let it go? Yes. Could I let it go? Yes. When? Now.
Mm-hmm.
And you repeat it over and over again. And it's amazing because what happens is that blockage leaves, because what it does is takes the emotion out of it. And so now you're able to be in a place of neutrality. And that's where I really try and help people get to. Because then you can look at it from different eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Like when you were talking about the lens,
Mm-hmm.
if you have a trigger from a parent and your child is doing the same thing and you're getting triggered, you're going to see that action in a very different way than your wife does
Right.
when your wife has no energy or attachment to it, right?
Right. Yeah, no, that's very true. So we're starting to sort of tip in the conversation, sort of the next piece that, where I want to go, which is, how is a lie built? That's in chapter 2, by the way. When you read the book, that's where you'll find it. Chapter 2, how are those lies built? And then, my second piece is, obviously, as I started reading the book, well, how are those lies broken? And I'm really thinking more about not just the lie itself, but more maybe the power broken. And you're starting to tip into that, where you're giving us an idea of how we begin to address this. And I have to tell you that when I read the book, I was reminded about an experience in my own life. I came from a troubled, we'll call it I had a troubled childhood, and I went through a season where I really struggled to like myself. And I used to write. Like, I used to have to write a lot of lines on the board at school because I wasn't well behaved. Let me put it that way. At times. And so I would write over and over at home that I hated myself. But I actually used my name. I hate Tim Windsor. I hate Tim Windsor. I hate Tim Windsor. And for years, when I was really angry at something in myself, I would write this over and over again. Well, later on in my life, although I have gone beyond it now, I developed a tic where when I was going to sign my signature, it's like I couldn't complete it. It's like I'd start my name on a check or something. Years ago when we wrote checks, I'd start my name, and I actually physically had like a hiccup in my hand where I couldn't write anymore, and then I'd have to go back and start again, and I would get to the same place, and I'd have this massive hiccup like my hand was paralyzed. And I no longer have that hiccup because in my physical signature, because I don't have that hiccup in my psyche anymore. But I can tell you there was something very powerful at work in the metaphysics of my signature that I believe were very much tied to this lie and this idea that I had about how I saw myself. Now I see myself differently. But at one point, I saw myself in a very different light. So I really identify with the struggle that you're talking about, and that's how I've seen it work out in my own life. Which I don't know if that's that unusual or not. It was definitely unusual for me, but that's been my own experience.
One of the things that I find, and this was a big one for me, is I didn't understand what loving yourself meant.
Mm,
Because when you grow up thinking you're broken, how could anyone love me, let alone I love myself? And
yeah.
I didn't even know what loving myself looked like or what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
When what I realized is it's boundaries,
Mm,
it's the ability to say no and to honor that no matter what someone else says, if I know myself well enough and I love myself, if someone's going to criticize me instead of getting triggered, I'm like, you're entitled to that. I'm good with that. And it sounds like you've gotten yourself to that place when you're able to write your signature, because when we repeat something over and over
mm,
again, we're actually creating that in our brain. You are reinforcing over and over
yeah.
and over again that message. And the subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between someone else saying it to you and you saying it. Like
Mm,
when you go see a movie and
yep.
you see someone being murdered versus actually witnessing a murder, there's almost no difference in the subconscious mind.
Mm.
It takes it in as real.
Interesting, interesting. So we started tipping in this direction. You talked a little bit about some of the lessons that you had from Dr. Al, I think you said. Was it Dr.
Yes.
Al? So can you give me and can you give my listeners maybe one or two other ideas that if they're starting to recognize that they got these hiccups, they got this skip that you talked about, they got this thing happening, and as they read your book, there are specific lies that you identify and get people to think about and explore, which I think is very great because these are very typical lies that all of us tend to buy into. They're beliefs, I should say, that have lies within them. There are beliefs, not there, and they are lies. There's lots of lies within them. But how else can we break those? What else would you recommend?
Well, I have a number of different techniques that I offer, and a lot of it is first coming to terms. You
Mm.
know, like in Alcoholics Anonymous, the first thing that you do is admit.
Mm-hmm.
The first thing you have to do is say, I have a problem.
Yeah.
Because I had someone who came to me who wanted to lose weight but was in a very controlling relationship. And her husband was locking the refrigerator and locking the pantry. And he told her that he didn't find her attractive anymore. And we were doing all kinds of work, and she started to lose the weight, and all of a sudden she ghosted me.
Mm.
And I started talking to her. I finally got hold of her, and she said, what happens if I lose the weight and he still doesn't find me attractive?
Mm.
It's like people sometimes want to hold on to the thing that they know.
Mm.
But I always say, when you have to step into who you are and know who you are as a human being, there's no hiding,
Mm.
because things will start to fall away, things will start to happen. So the first thing I always say is acknowledge it. The second thing is you want to look at your beliefs around it.
Mm.
And when you can release the emotions
Mm.
that are attached to it and look at it, I can't tell you how many people look at something from a different perspective.
Right.
You know, they may see a parent in a certain way, and then when they look at it from a distance, look at it from an adult, go, wow, they were just doing the best they could with what they had. I struggle with that same thing. But from a child's perspective, you may say, oh my God, they were so mean.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, when you see the amount of stress as an adult having to take care of a family and doing all the things that they're doing and dealing with their own demons, you can see them from a different perspective.
Mm. Yeah, no, and I can identify that as well. I think about a lot of times. I had a trouble relationship with my father. He left when I was quite young, and I never understood this idea of how you could ever not want to be with your own children until I had children and got to a point sometimes of sheer frustration and found myself thinking things in my mind that were anathema to me. This idea that I could ever have those thoughts. And I remember thinking at that time, well, I guess maybe I get it. And maybe my dad was doing his best at the time based on the circumstances. It doesn't excuse a lot of things, but at the same time, it does cause you to look at things differently through a different lens and understand that in that belief about my dad, there are also some lies, because the safe belief, I think, when you come from trauma, is to believe that that person in essence is evil and horrible and there's no redeeming qualities. But the lie within that is actually they're an amalgam of light and darkness, like we all are, and that was a challenge for me. But I would say that I've grown a lot through exploring that.
Well, what's really interesting is there's another perspective of that. Sometimes when parents leave, what people don't realize is they don't feel worthy of being a parent.
Interesting.
They don't understand what they have to offer and think that the children would be better served with someone else.
Yeah.
And that's a hard pill to swallow, because as a child, when you grow up with that sense of abandonment, to say,
Right.
well, what do you mean? How
Right.
is that possible? But there are other perspectives, and that's why I always also work with people around reframing. You
Mm.
want to see things from different perspectives, and also one of the most critical things that you can do is forgiveness.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness is the key to everything. And I use this quote in the book. Resentment is the equivalent of swallowing a poison pill expecting the other person to die. It
Interesting.
it doesn't mean that what the other person did is okay,
Right.
but it's you carrying it. It's that backpack full of bowling balls. And here's the other thing that's
Mm.
so frustrating for people. They're like, I hate this person, and I'm like, how much energy are you putting into it? Oh,
Mm.
80% of my day. How much do you think they think about you?
Sure.
Probably none. So who's winning here?
Yeah.
So when you put down that backpack full of bowling balls and you sit back and go, you know, how is this serving me by carrying it? Again, it's you take the learning from it. It's never okay to hurt someone, but you want to see the perspective of maybe they were doing just the best they could with what they had at the time. And I always like to think about people always trying to do their best,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what.
Mm-hmm. No, it's very important. So listen again. If you're listening in, I think you're listening for a reason. No, I don't think. I know that you are listening for a reason. There's a reason why you're spending some time with Lisa and I today. What it could be daytime, nighttime. Who knows what time you're listening to this podcast? That's the grand thing about once it's recorded, you can listen to it, and that's kind of an interesting thing because we're recording it now. But when people listen, it is now for them as well. There's two moments of now, which is interesting. So in the now moment that you're listening to this, if you're listening, what is this saying to you? What is it you would like to do? What do you need to do? What must you do possibly as a result of what you're hearing today? Well, one of the things I would encourage you to do is pick up Lisa's book. It is provocative. It's well written. It is, I've had a chance now, Lisa, of sitting down with you twice and spending time with you on the podcast. And what I liked about the book is that it was like just sitting down and chatting with Lisa, which I really appreciated about it when I read it, because I've had a chance and the privilege to do this a couple of times with you now. So, if, where can people, what's the best way for people to find you and to find this book? What's best for you? Because some places that people buy the book, it isn't always as best for you. So I'd like to know, what's the best place for people to buy this book for Lisa?
Well, the best place to buy it is on Amazon.
Okay.
And if you like it, please share a review, because that helps the book gain legs and the algorithm. So
Okay.
that's what helps me the most. If you feel compelled that you really want a signed copy, I have some here, and I can mail them out. I know you're in Canada, so
Well,
the the shipping is as much as the book.
Well, I know, fair enough. Although I was just, you know what, I probably wasn't too far from you last week. So I think you live in, do you live in Vermont?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so I was in northern New York State at Glens Falls.
Yep.
And you and I actually a couple times ago, I have a client there. He has a plane. We flew actually to Vermont to have dinner one night. So I imagine I'm not I'm going to be far from you. So eventually, I'm going to find you, Lisa. I'm going to find you on the planet, and I want this copy signed. That I need a commitment to that.
My pleasure. I would love that. And yeah, I'd love to know what airport you're at because it may not be far from me. If
Yeah,
you're
no,
northern or central Vermont.
yeah, it was. I have to look at it. It's not Bennington. It was. I want to say it starts with an R.
Rutland.
Yes, yeah. So
Yeah, you're south of me.
there you go. Fair enough. So listen, we're going to get connected sometime, and who knows, maybe we'll do something together. We'll speak together sometime. Lisa, thank you so much for joining me on the show, and thanks for coming in and talking about your book, but more importantly than the book, but talking about this idea that's so important for everybody to explore. Because the reality is there is a lot of truth in the title, and every belief is a lie. And you would be well served, as I am well served, to listen to some of the wisdom that Lisa has in this book and explore it for our benefit and for the benefit of others in your life. And I'm going to encourage you, as you do me a favor. Send me an email at tim@theuncommodified.com or look me up on social media. You can connect with Lisa on social media as well. What's the best place for them to find you personally? What's the best way for that
Yeah,
happen, Lisa?
LinkedIn, Lisa Schermerhorn. I also have my website, Peak Performance Mindset
Okay.
Coaching.com. I also have a website with my name too, but I found that people could spell Schermerhorn, so
So you went in a different direction.
Lisa Schermerhorn Coaching. But yeah, the Peak Performance Mindset Coaching, and also in the book are QR codes.
Okay.
So there's a QR code that you can go to, and we're still working on the technology, but it should be able to take you to videos
Okay.
that will step you through some of the techniques that I was just talking about. And my business partner, Kevin, is in there also because he has some really great stuff in there too. And we're going to add to that library. So you'll be able to access it. I'm working on the technology right now. Hopefully they fixed it.
Okay.
But
Awesome.
yeah, use the QR codes.
Excellent. Great. Lisa, thanks so much. Thanks for joining me. And again, thanks for listening in. We appreciate your time today. Go out and uncommodify your world. And remember that in every belief is a lie. And there's a great opportunity to explore that and ask yourself, what do you want to do about that? Thanks for listening. Have a great day. Cheers.